There are moments in a nation's history when something shifts, quietly at first, then unmistakably. Canada is standing at one of those crossroads right now. For decades, Canadians have grown used to the idea that advanced fighter jets must come from somewhere else, designed somewhere else, built somewhere else, and governed by someone else's rules. But what if that era is ending? What if Canada, a country with enormous talent, enormous resources, and enormous airspace to protect, suddenly has the chance to build its own fighter jets again? Not assemble a few parts, not bolt on equipment, but truly manufacture the aircraft that will patrol its own skies. That is the offer now placed before Canada, and it is far more ambitious than the public has been told. This is not merely a procurement option. This is a chance to reshape Canada's aerospace industry, to reclaim an identity that once burned bright with projects like the legendary Avro Aero, and to send a message to the world that Canada is stepping out of the shadows and taking control of its future. Imagine a Canada where fighter jets are not flown into Canadian bases after months of waiting, but rolled out of Canadian hangars. Designed, assembled, tested, and maintained by Canadian workers. Imagine a factory in Ontario, Alberta, or Quebec, where engineers in winter jackets walk across spotless floors, adjusting digital schematics on giant screens. Imagine wings laid out on reinforced tables, avionics modules being calibrated with precision tools, and crews of young technicians learning skills that keep them in Canada instead of losing them to jobs abroad. That is the vision, a complete end-to-end production and maintenance ecosystem on Canadian soil. For generations, Canada has depended heavily on foreign supply chains, engines built overseas, electronics built overseas, software written overseas. Every upgrade required permissions, every spare part required contracts, every maintenance cycle was subject to someone else's approval schedule. Canada never fully controlled its own fleet. It operated jets, but did not own the means to sustain them. And in a world that is becoming more unstable, that model is no longer good enough. The Swedish proposal disrupts this entire pattern. It offers something Canada has not had in decades: full industrial sovereignty, not partial assembly, not token offsets. A real, functional, long-term aerospace manufacturing cluster built for Canada, inside Canada, and staffed by Canadians. This would mean the construction of a complete factory capable of producing wings, avionics, fuselages, wiring systems, radar components, and final assembly units. It would mean that Canadian provinces, often overlooked in global supply chains, could become central hubs in the creation of advanced military aircraft. Picture the scene more clearly. A Canadian facility with intelligent robots welding precise seams along a future fighter's airframe, technicians installing sensors, radar arrays, and flight computers, engineers analyzing digital diagnostics to refine the aircraft's capabilities, a workforce that grows season after season, building not just planes, but generational knowledge. A place where innovation does not need to be imported, because it is developed locally by Canadian minds. This is not a fantasy. This is a blueprint that already exists and has been executed in Brazil and other nations that partnered with Sweden. But for Canada, the scale would be even greater. And for Canada, this is more than technology. It is pride. The idea that Canada could once again step into the world of high-performance aerospace, not as a dependent buyer, but as a builder, resonates deeply. Canadians know their history. They know the Aero was ahead of its time. They know that the country once had the potential to lead the world in aviation. This new proposal whispers something powerful. Canada can rise again. Canada can build again. And this time, no one will pull the plug. Operationally, the benefits match Canada's geography perfectly. Canada's territory is vast, stretching across freezing Arctic zones, remote runways, unpredictable storms, and long-distance patrol requirements. A modular fighter designed for harsh conditions, quick maintenance turnarounds, and dispersed basing aligns directly with what the Royal Canadian Air Force needs. A system that does not require massive concrete infrastructure. A system designed to operate from simple runways. A system optimized for flexibility, self-reliance, and quick response times across the second-largest country on Earth. But the true game-changer is this. A homegrown production capability means Canada can upgrade its aircraft on its own timeline. New sensors? Install them locally. New software? Write it locally. New mission data? Program it locally. No approvals from foreign governments. No waiting for international supply chains. No vulnerability to export restrictions. This is what sovereignty actually looks like, not just in political speeches, but in the day-to-day reality of aircraft readiness. And if Canada builds jets at home, the ripple effect is massive. Thousands of skilled jobs across multiple provinces, a resurgence in aerospace education at Canadian colleges and universities, a wave of innovation that spills into civilian industries, materials, robotics, simulation technologies, and advanced electronics. Instead of sending billions overseas, Canada would invest in itself. Money stays in the Canadian economy. Talent stays in the Canadian workforce. A new generation grows up believing that building advanced aircraft is something Canadians do, not something they only buy. From a global perspective, the implications are just as large. Nations that control their own aerospace production hold a different kind of leverage. They negotiate differently. They operate differently. They are respected differently. If Canada becomes a builder, not just a buyer, it sends a message to allies and competitors alike. Canada is no longer content to outsource its future. Canada intends to shape it. This is the first chapter of a story that could define Canada's next 50 years. A story about reawakening a sleeping giant of innovation. A story about a country rediscovering what it can do when it trusts its own talent. A story about a nation deciding that the sky above its territory should be protected by aircraft carrying not just a Canadian flag, but Canadian craftsmanship on every panel, every bolt, every line of code. The question now is simple, but historic. Will Canada choose to build? As Canada explores what this transformation could mean, the scale of the opportunity becomes even more clear. Building fighter jets domestically is not just a matter of having a factory. It is the foundation of a generational industrial shift, one that changes how Canadians think about their own capabilities. For decades, the narrative has been that Canada is a consumer of advanced defense technology, not a producer. But many Canadians have quietly disagreed with that assumption, remembering a time when Canadian aerospace engineering rivaled the world's best. This proposal reignites that legacy. If Canada commits to this path, it would gain access to a full spectrum of technical knowledge: software architecture, aerostructure integration, radar engineering, advanced avionics, flight control systems, sensor fusion, and high-performance materials. In today's defense environment, having such knowledge inside your own borders is worth more than any single aircraft purchase. It is the key that unlocks independence. It gives a nation the freedom to innovate without waiting for external approval. That is why the Swedish model stands out. Unlike traditional defense suppliers, Sweden does not seek to create dependency. Its philosophy, shaped by decades of neutrality, limited resources, and a commitment to self-reliance, is to design systems that nations can manage themselves. Gripen was built with the idea that even a mid-sized country should be able to maintain, upgrade, and improve its own aircraft without foreign bottlenecks. This is exactly the kind of model that resonates with Canadians, who value autonomy yet understand the importance of strong alliances. A deeper look shows how strongly this aligns with Canada's geography and defense posture. Canada does not need a fighter built for distant expeditionary wars. It needs a fighter built for sovereignty enforcement, Arctic patrols, coastal security, rapid scramble capability, and reliable performance across extreme climates. It needs a system that can launch from remote runways, operate in freezing temperatures, and return to service quickly with manageable maintenance. A modular aircraft with distributed basing principles fits Canada's needs far more naturally than platforms designed for massive centralized air bases. This is where Canadians often feel misunderstood by larger countries. Canada's air defense requirements are unique. No other NATO country guards an Arctic frontier of this magnitude. No other allied nation must secure such vast stretches of wilderness with relatively limited personnel. And no other country combines such a large geographic footprint with a deep cultural expectation of quiet, dependable national defense rather than flashy power projection. A fighter program that recognizes these realities is not merely helpful, it is essential. The economic impact is another core element Canadians would feel immediately. A domestic jet-building program could stimulate thousands of jobs in engineering, machining, composite fabrication, avionics integration, software development, logistics, and testing. These positions wouldn't be temporary. They would form a sustainable ecosystem lasting decades. Universities and colleges would expand aerospace programs. Apprenticeships would thrive. Local suppliers in provinces across the country would receive steady contracts. The aerospace sector, after years of being overshadowed by U.S. giants, would surge back to life. The effect would ripple outward. New tech clusters would emerge. Startups would form around simulation systems, materials science, robotics, and advanced digital manufacturing. Canada's civilian aviation sector, already respected worldwide, would also benefit from the influx of new expertise and infrastructure. And perhaps most importantly, young talent would see a future at home rather than feeling compelled to move to Silicon Valley, Seattle, or Europe. For many Canadians, the possibility of reversing the long-standing brain drain is deeply emotional. This project speaks directly to that aspiration. Viewed from a geopolitical angle, the implications are just as significant. Countries that control the production of their own fighter jets instantly gain a new level of diplomatic capital. They become contributors to allied strength, not just participants. They gain leverage in procurement negotiations. They are no longer dependent on the timelines or political preferences of foreign suppliers. For Canada, this means standing taller in NORAD, in NATO, and in all international defense partnerships. A nation that builds its own wings commands a different kind of respect. Such a shift does not happen without consequences. Major defense industries in other countries may view Canada's industrial rise as a threat. Lobby groups may attempt to influence the debate. Diplomatic pressure, subtle or direct, may appear. But this is part of the journey for any country choosing independence. And for Canadians, who value fairness, sovereignty, and quiet determination, This challenge is not intimidating. It is motivating. One key lesson from Sweden's partnership with Brazil demonstrates what Canada could achieve. Brazil did not simply purchase a fleet. It established a domestic aerospace capability that will last for generations. Hundreds of engineers were trained. Factories were built. Entire sectors modernized. Today, Brazil is not just operating a fighter, it is co-developing one. Canada, with its significantly stronger industrial base, could go even further. And here is where the emotional core of the story touches Canadians most deeply. Canada has done this before. Canadians remember being capable of world-leading aerospace innovation. They remember the Arrow. They remember what it felt like to be on the cutting edge. There is a quiet belief across the country that this potential was never truly lost. It was simply never given another chance. The Swedish offer is not just a contract. It is a second chance at something Canada once dreamed of. This is why Canadians who hear about this proposal often react with renewed energy. Why aren't we doing this already? It aligns with Canadian values: competence, reliability, collaboration, and self-respect. It aligns with Canadian strategic needs: Arctic capability, sovereignty, and independence within alliances. And it aligns with Canadian identity: a nation that builds, improves, innovates, and quietly excels. Yet to seize this opportunity requires clarity of purpose. Political leaders must recognize that this is not a short-term procurement project, but a generational investment. It requires predictable funding, long-term planning, and a commitment to building the workforce that will support the program. It requires coordination between provinces, industries, and educational institutions. And it requires the courage to acknowledge that Canada is capable of more than it has been allowed to believe. If this commitment is made, Canada will enter a new era, one where its aerospace sector rises, its Arctic is better protected, its alliances are strengthened, and its economic future becomes more secure. It is a moment that asks Canada not just what it needs today, but what it wants to become tomorrow. A buyer or a builder, a follower or a leader, a nation defined by past cancellations, or one defined by new creations. Canada has the answer within reach. As Canada looks forward, the choice ahead becomes more than a matter of defense, budgeting, or procurement preference. It becomes a moment of identity. For years, Canadians have watched other nations shape the global aerospace landscape, while Canada, with all its intelligence, stability, and resources, remained on the sidelines. The truth is simple. Canada has everything it needs to become a builder again. The question now is whether Canada believes in its own potential enough to seize it. Any decision to establish domestic fighter jet production will demand courage. It will require confronting the inevitable challenges that come with the birth of a new industrial age. Skilled labor shortages, political debates, cost fluctuations, regulatory complexities, and the steep learning curve of high-performance aviation. But every country that has built its own aerospace capability began exactly this way, including Sweden, including Brazil, including nations far smaller or less developed than Canada. The path has never been easy, but it has always been transformative. Canadians understand this. They understand that great nations are not defined by their obstacles, but by their willingness to overcome them. And Canada's history is full of examples where the country rose higher than anyone expected, building transcontinental railroads across unforgiving terrain, establishing world-leading peacekeeping standards, creating some of the most respected universities in the world, and contributing innovations in science, medicine, and engineering that have shaped entire industries. Why should aerospace be any different? A fighter built in Canada would bring more than strategic advantage. It would bring dignity, pride, a sense of authorship over the tools that guard the world's second-largest national airspace. It would send a message that Canada no longer waits for others to define its capabilities or limitations. Instead, Canada builds what it needs, on its own terms. For decades, Canadians have had to accept a quiet paradox. One of the most peaceful, stable, and resourceful democracies on the planet has rarely controlled the means to defend itself independently. Despite having the talent, the land, the education systems, and the industrial capacity, Canada relied on foreign production for the aircraft that protect its sovereignty. But that era can end. A Canadian-built fighter is not a dream. It is a decision. And that decision carries enormous geopolitical weight. A Canada that builds its own fighter jets becomes a Canada with influence, not just partnership. It would elevate Canada's standing in NATO, accelerate its relevance in Arctic strategy, and increase its credibility as a nation capable of advanced technological leadership. Allies would see Canada not only as a contributor, but as a cornerstone, a country that invests in shared capability and stands ready to support continental defense not only with money, but with manufacturing and innovation. This matters enormously in an era when Arctic security is no longer theoretical. The North is changing. Great powers are turning their eyes there. Ice routes are shifting, and sovereignty patrols are becoming more essential. A fleet of jets designed, upgraded, and maintained in Canada would give the country unprecedented control over its northern skies. Mission data could be managed domestically. Sensors optimized for Arctic conditions could be developed on Canadian timelines. The aircraft could evolve with Canada's needs rather than foreign priorities. This is how a nation secures its future, not by relying on what others will allow, but by building what it requires. But beyond all strategic considerations, there is a deeper emotional current running beneath this proposal. Canadians have long lived with the legacy of the Arrow. It remains one of the most defining what-ifs in Canadian history, a symbol of what the country could achieve when it believed in itself, a reminder of how quickly potential can be lost when vision is abandoned. Many Canadians feel, quietly but deeply, that something was taken from them, not just a project, but a sense of possibility. What is being offered today is not the Arrow reborn, but something spiritually similar, a chance to reclaim that sense of possibility, a chance to show the world, and perhaps more importantly, to show themselves, that Canada still has the courage to build remarkable things. That Canada's best engineers do not need to relocate to Silicon Valley, Seattle, or Boston to pursue meaningful innovation. That Canada can produce not only natural resources, but advanced technology worthy of the world stage. The idea of Canadian technicians tightening bolts on Canadian-built aircraft, of Canadian software engineers writing mission systems tailored for Canadian needs, of Canadian pilots flying jets crafted with Canadian workmanship. This image is powerful. It is the kind of image that stirs national confidence, the kind that future generations will grow up remembering. Children will see those jets and say, "We made that." And that matters more than most people realize. Industrial sovereignty is not about nationalism. It is about identity, responsibility, pride in capability. It is about the belief that nations, like people, become stronger when they take ownership of their future. And Canada, a country defined by resilience, cooperation, and quiet excellence, is more than ready for that responsibility. But every opportunity has a window. Moments like this do not last forever. Decisions deferred too long tend to evaporate. The world moves forward. Industries settle into patterns, and the chance to leap ahead can disappear as quickly as it emerged. That is why Canada must look clearly at what is being offered and ask itself, if not now, when? The choice is stark but empowering. Canada can continue purchasing jets from abroad, accepting the familiar systems of dependency and external control. Or Canada can step forward into a new era, one in which it builds, upgrades, innovates, and protects its skies with machines assembled by its own people. The future belongs to nations that build, not nations that merely buy. And Canada, with its intelligent workforce, vast airspace, and quiet strength, is fully capable of being one of those nations. The only question left is whether Canada is ready to believe in the full measure of its own potential. Because when a country builds its own wings, it doesn't just defend its skies, it defines its destiny. Thank you for watching and for being part of this growing community of Canadians who care about aerospace, sovereignty, and the future of our country. If you found this video thought-provoking or inspiring, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us reach more Canadians who want deeper, smarter conversations about our national capabilities and the choices that will shape the next generation. I'd love to hear your thoughts, because your voice truly matters here. Do you think Canada should build its own fighter jets again if the opportunity becomes real? Which province do you believe would benefit the most from hosting a new aerospace manufacturing hub? What part of Canada's future matters most to you? Jobs, sovereignty, or technological independence? Share your answers in the comments below. Your perspective adds real value to this community, and your ideas help guide future videos. Thank you again for your time, your insight, and your curiosity. Wishing you a strong, hopeful, and inspiring day ahead. See you in the next video.